Hello, wrestling friends. I'm Matt Koon, which means you're listening to Wrestling Friends with me, Matt Koon. And despite the fact that I might need to come up with a different intro, I want to welcome you to our first ever episode of Wrestling Friends. What is the show? What are we going to do? I'm not going to talk about it too long because it's kind of obvious. But just to put it short, I've been a wrestling fan for a long time. And the past few years, I've gotten to live an incredible wrestling life. I've gotten to do things that, as a wrestling fan, are just dreams come true. And it's been just a blast. I've enjoyed it. I've gotten to hang out in backstage of areas. I've gotten to become friends with these wrestlers that I looked up to or that I respected. I've gotten to interview a lot of wrestlers I grew up watching, and I've gotten to be part of some of the biggest moments in wrestling history, maybe a little tiny part, but still, it's amazing. But the best part of it is I've gotten to make some great wrestling friends. You know those guys, right? Like, some guys that you can just talk to about wrestling. Some guys that maybe are friends for life now, but you met through wrestling. Or maybe even some people that you've never met yet, but you talk to on Twitter. There's a million types of wrestling friends, and we hope you'll be our wrestling friend here. Now, of course, you might know, me from the FTR with Dax podcast, or Gentleman Villain with William Regal, or one of many other podcasts that I've done over the years. And, the criticism's real. I've moved around a little bit. I've stopped a few podcasts, but this one I think is going to stick. I think this is the one. I think this is the one I was meant to do because as someone who has loved professional wrestling my whole life, and as a kid, I couldn't really share it with people because I don't know about you, but as a kid, there was maybe a little bit of shame in being a wrestling fan. But now I have all these great friends through wrestling, and I want to share the experience of being a wrestling fan, talk about professional wrestling, talk about maybe a little content creation, talk about the internet wrestling community, all those kind of things on this show, Wrestling Friends with Matt Koon. So thank you again for joining us, and let's get started. So I had to decide what I wanted to do on this show besides the interview. We're always going to have an interview with a wrestling friend. Of course, this week is with Cameron Hawkins, known as Seahawk on Twitter. He is a guy who I've listened to for a long time on the Pro Wrestling Torch. I always thought he was just kind of brilliant and also had a unique viewpoint, but also the way he engages with people is unique and something that I kind of look up to and respect. And then over the years, got to know him on Twitter, where he is just brilliant. And then now he's writing for The Ringer, which is one of the best, online publications of any type, but sports in particular. And he's done some great features on Lita and FTR and Sting. I want you to check it out, but most importantly, check out the interview. It's going to be coming up in just a few minutes. But what else are we going to do on the show? Because quite honestly, I'm not the most captivating personality. I know I can talk to people, but as far as just me talking to the screen, I'm not Sam Roberts, I'm not Sean Ross Sapp. I'm not one of these guys who's really funny or really interesting, but maybe I have a unique viewpoint, and maybe, we can just be wrestling friends. So we're going to cut through some of the big topics in wrestling, but really quick. We're not going to spend a lot of time on each, but I actually recorded this intro a couple days ago, but everything has been outdated. So I'm recording this as we speak, hours before the show comes out. So the first topic is Wembley Stadium. AEW announced All In, and then tickets went on sale on Tuesday, this past Tuesday, May 3rd or some such, I guess May 2nd, and 36,000 tickets sold. That's insane. What a great moment for All Elite Wrestling. What a great moment for wrestling. And it brought out, a few of the haters, but there's no hating the fact that these guys in All Elite Wrestling, when it comes to big shows, sell big tickets. There is no doubt in the world now it is a success. 35,000 tickets is a success. How many will they sell? Well, that is going to be up to them because it does fit, I think, 92,000. And 92,000, that's a tall task. And how could they get that 92,000? Well, I think we all know. And I think maybe my past podcast got in a little bit of trouble because, maybe having somebody who works for a company talk about what that company should do while the company's in the middle of a bunch of stuff isn't the best idea. That is entirely I will call it my fault. I have the right to edit the shows. I can totally do it. Even if I tell Dax, hey, let me edit out this part, he might say, well, let's leave it in. And there's a few times that happened. But for me, maybe I could have been smarter and cut it out. So as far as the podcast ending, once everything got super hot and we decided, man, this ain't worth it, I'll put it on myself. But I don't work for AEW. I don't owe AEW anything. AEW doesn't owe me anything. I'm a big fan. I've supported them since before they were a thing when I was working with Vince Russo, and I'm going to keep supporting them. But also, I'm not going to mind being critical either. And this is one point I'll be a little critical on, because it was put out on the podcast, and this was something that got people up in arms. Some of the wrestling reporters are like, oh, they're doing this on purpose to mess people up. But no, CM Punk and FTR versus the Elite is the dream match for All In. It is not going to happen. I'm 100% sure it's not going to happen, but it should happen, because not only selling the tickets, because they're not going to be trouble selling more tickets, but selling that amount of tickets, that 92,000, CM Punk and FTR versus the Elite would do it. Not only that, it would be the most talked about match. It would elevate AEW to an entirely new level, and I think it would be a difficult thing to do. And like I said, I'm pretty sure it's impossible. But that is the match. And, if we're going to be a little critical here, we can't just, bash WWE and endorse All Elite Wrestling and become one of those guys who doesn't see things as they are. The reality is, if you own a place, if you own a business, and you have employees, and I own a business, I have employees. So if one of my employees, I say, hey, man, I need you to work on Tuesday and do these lessons. And he goes, man, I do it, but I can't work with so-and-so. Bro, I need you to do your job. I need you to do your job. That's your job. That's what I'm paying you for. That's your job. And for you to tell me who you can or can't work with, especially in this situation where it's going to help the entire company, maybe belies an opinion that the culture needs to be changed a little bit over at All Elite Wrestling, because the wrestlers shouldn't call the shots. Dax can be on the podcast that we did forever talking about stuff. It's not going to get done, but he's going to talk about it. He's not going to say, I refuse to do this, I refuse to do that. And I don't know the ins and outs except what the wrestling reporters report, and what I've heard is people don't want to work with CM Punk. And I'm saying, hey, you're an employee. If you do this job, you might be glad you did, but you probably should too. Next subject. Tony Khan tweeting. Tony Khan tweeted today, and it was one of those things where people said it's something maybe he shouldn't have tweeted. But, and when you look at the way Tony Khan has been lately, he's really laid off of the Twitter. He has the, maybe they look like automated tweets almost, like every Dynamite, every Rampage, promoting it, talking about justified, this is awesome tweets. It's cool, and he's gotten a little trouble before with some people. Seahawks going to talk about one of those tweets later on. But he tweeted today because a reporter with ESPN said, hey, I heard All Elite Wrestling is set up for 40,000 at Wembley, not 92,000. Man, how great is it to see stuff with 92,000 people there? I saw Tyson Fury wrestle or box with 92,000 people there. And, Tony Khan took exception to that. And, he called, he didn't really do anything completely crazy or anything, but he just said, hey, this is bull crap. This is false. Where are your sources? Where do you get this? But then he put out another tweet that said, hey, why don't you talk to your agent, Nick Khan? Nick Khan, of course, runs WWE and also is with CAA, which is this guy's agent, this reporter, whose name doesn't even matter. So people saying Tony Khan shouldn't have tweeted that. Tony Khan shouldn't have said that. Tony Khan needs to act like a boss, all this. I just criticized AEW and, by extension, Tony Khan for letting the employees, do what they want to do in certain cases. So it's not like me just kissing up to say this. But guys, if you've started a business, I started a business, completely run on my passion, 100%. Worked so hard getting it started. Just 100-hour weeks, one after the other, doing stuff I had no business doing, but I just figured out how to do it. And it's all because I wanted to do things the way I thought they should be done, because I love music. I wanted music to be taught. And certain people, you know, they lay some critiques on it, you know, and I'm like, bro, you didn't do it. You don't know. And we're going to talk about that mindset a little bit later. But I totally get Tony Khan coming out rageful against disingenuous people who are just trying to cut down his company. 100%. I got no issues with Tony Khan doing that. Go, Tony. It's your baby. I get it. A lot of people don't get it, but I totally get it. And if you don't like it, you got to put yourself in his shoes, man. This guy works hard, and all he wants, like, what's he in it for? He's already rich. So he ain't trying to get richer. He just wants a good wrestling company and wants wrestling to be better. Why else do you think he'd give us Muta and Sting in the ring together? It's because he's a wrestling fan. And I think a lot of these haters who hate on Tony Khan do so out of jealousy because they weren't born with $1 billion. And by the way, it's not Tony Khan's fault he was born with $1 billion. It's his dad's fault for living the American dream and totally kicking ass in this lifetime. And then what's Tony Khan doing with his money? What would you do with his money? He's starting a wrestling company and putting his money where his mouth is. So when people talk crap, especially disingenuous people who may or may not have a conflict of interest, I get it. And I think maybe you should too. So, WWE talk. Speaking of the WWE, we just had a draft. Man, the WWE loves a draft, don't they? They just promote it. They set it up. It's 2 nights. People are drafted different places. NXT call-ups are so exciting. People jumping from one place to the other. Ooh, the Usos and Roman, different brands. All this stuff. And here's a problem, though, right? You know, number one, it usually makes no sense at all. Like, they had an announcement that certain wrestlers from Omos to Brock Lesnar had negotiated not being on either brand without really clarifying what that meant. So that doesn't make any sense. But the biggest issue with the draft, as you may know, it doesn't matter at all. It never has. It never will. Well, maybe it did the first time. You know, when you think about that first time and they had the draft and you end up with Shawn Michaels and Kurt Angle at WrestleMania, I think that's the payoff of what a draft could be. But since then, there's never been any indication that WWE has the discipline to keep the brand separate to do what it's intended to do. It seems like a face value type thing for the companies that might be paying in the future for the rights of WWE, to convince them that there's 2 different shows with 2 different rosters. When the first chance they get, they jump. So the draft doesn't matter. It is dumb, and it doesn't mean anything. But we all get caught up in it. We shouldn't, because 2 months from now, they're all going to be jumping around brands. There's going to be an exception rule, and there's going to be a big WWE switcheroo or whatever they call it, superstar shakeup. It's never any good. And there's got to be a better way to do it, right? It's either keep them separate or don't. But every time that they do this and they don't follow through, they lose credibility. They lose fans, because we just want something to believe in. And the draft is not that thing to believe. And speaking of something to believe, it's been a couple weeks, but WWE announced a new title. And I don't even know what it's called. I don't care. But it's a new title. It's a new heavyweight title, a new big title. It really means something. It's like, this is the Raw title. Because the SmackDown titles belongs to Roman Reigns. And ostensibly, it seems like this new title will be held, or at least, contested by Cody Rhodes. But again, this is one of those things where WWE and any wrestling company that does this needs to respect their fans. Continuity is important. Believability is important. Having fans investing in a story and then just not even caring about it always leads to people dropping off, always leads to people losing interest, and, leads to a lack of passion from wrestling fans. When you think of how hot WWE was a couple months ago before WrestleMania, ooh, Sami Zayn, Cody Rhodes, the Usos, and all that seems to have died down a little bit, and they made this new title, which is insane. it's what? Like, what? Why would you do that? Like, Roman Reigns has these 2 titles and he just left. He just left. He'll be back in a couple of months, but he's kind of doing that Brock Lesnar after WrestleMania schedule. But Cody Rhodes said, I want to finish the story. Number 1, this is the title my dad fought for in the late 70s at Madison Square Garden with amazing matches with superstar Billy Graham, and I want that belt. That's the belt. Now, that particular belt, many years later, was merged with another belt that his dad held, the big gold belt, the NWA belt / WCW belt, but those 2 were merged together, I believe by Chris Jericho. So everything Cody wants to finish the story, as he says, that he's actually laid out for us very well, exists in those belts. For some reason, WWE made the amazing decision, that's sarcasm, to have Cody lose at WrestleMania. All right, so do that. But now you just put Cody over on a different brand with a different belt, and man, all that excitement just seems to have died down. And it ain't on Cody. It's on whoever makes those decisions. Here's what I think should happen, and I might get into it, but, you know, fantasy booking is just, there's a lot of people that do it better than me, and there's just, you know, it's so funny, we all think we can do it, right? Like, I think I can do it. Put me in a room with Tony Khan or Vince McMahon, I can do it. But you know what? It's a hard thing to do. It really is. But if I were booking, that being said, if I were booking, all the stuff I just said, just throw it to the side, because I'm going to say that being said, and that wipes it away, and I can say something else. So that being said, I would love for Cody Rhodes to win that title, throw it in the trash, and say, I want the real belts. Because, as I've said, if there are 2 world championships, there's no world championships. And if there's 3 world championships, there's definitely no world championship. Let's keep it at 1. They're merged together. Those are the belts with the heritage. They're the belts with the lineage. They're the belts that complete the story. That new belt is ridiculous and a terrible, terrible idea. But you know it's not a terrible idea, folks. That's right. Blue Chew. You didn't think I was going to do a podcast without Blue Chew, did you? Now, everyone I know swears by Blue Chew. You heard Dax talking about Blue Chew. You've heard Conrad on all those podcasts talking about Blue Chew, and you've heard me say a million times, you know, the nights are getting longer or the nights are getting shorter, but the breeze isn't the only thing that's getting stiff, you know, all that kind of stuff. But the reality is Blue Chew is the shit. Everybody I know who's done it who has used BlueChew.com has just extolled the virtues of it, from Dax to my old friend Corey Ryan Forrester, who told a story and said when he had sex with his wife the first time with it, his wife said, that ain't your dick. So, you know, Blue Chew, you know, because what's better than sex? Like, you know, nothing really. And good sex, great sex, confident sex is where Blue Chew comes in, because it is the unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra and Cialis, but in chewable tablets and at a fraction of the cost. You can take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready when an opportunity arises. You know, puns aside, Blue Chew has been around for a while because it works and people like it and people are happy with it. And the best part is it's done online. No visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversations, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy. Blue Chew's tablets are made in the USA. Yeah, America. And prepared and shipped direct to your door in a discreet package for your package. As you know, confidence is everything. And if you're lacking that confidence, and just a quick little jaunt on the old internet to BlueChew.com can help give you that confidence, it's worth its weight in gold. How much would you pay for that? $1,000? $500? How about $100? How about $50? How about free, son? Go to BlueChew.com right now and use our promo code. That's right, legacy promo code DAX at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com promo code DAX to receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring the podcast. All right, guys, like I said earlier, joining us right now is someone that I respect a lot and actually is a wrestling friend that I have not met. I know him on Twitter. I've followed him for a long time. We've interacted a bit, and we're finally going to get to meet face-to-face, and his name is Cameron Hawkins. Mr. Hawkins is a writer for The Ringer. I've known him a long time through the Torch, Pro Wrestling Torch, but mostly it's the writing now and also the online presence. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Cam. How's everything going?
Absolutely, man. Everything's all right. Everything's cool. It's a nice, nice sunny day. Enjoying the weather, enjoying outside as much as I can. Things are good. Things are all right.
Well, dude, I really appreciate you joining us for our first show here. And I wanted to have you on because you have such a unique perspective on wrestling. Like, everybody says this, everybody says that. They take sides, but you tend to kind of, number one, stay above the fray, and number two, kind of disarm people who try to get you into a back and forth. Is that on purpose, or is that something that is just you?
I think that it's developed over time. I think that one thing that changed for me over the years is that, you go into a wrestling conversation with a very firm opinion or stance, then you talk to three people and they're like, well, Cam, let me tell you, like, that's not what it is at all. And it's like, oh. And so it's not just about being right or wrong, but these things are always so layered and so intricate that there are certain things you should always take firm stances on, but a lot of like the business aspect and the relationships between different parties and stuff like that, it changes so much. It's so malleable, and having a firm stance on things like this ends up making you look silly down the road. And I think what I started to do, somebody would have like a really crazy opinion and I would screenshot it. And I would say, as soon as they're proven wrong, I'm going to post this and let them know how wrong they were.
Show them.
But then I realized how silly that was, because they don't actually care. They just wanted to say something in the moment. And so I'm the one that's holding on to it for no reason, So yeah, it just became a thing where, you know more information, you learn more things, but also you realize how trivial so much of it is. And it's just like, I don't really want any part of this. Like, I'm not having fun worrying about this all day.
And I have a bunch of questions I want to ask you, but I do want to get into this because it does seem silly. But there's also some other stuff at work. Number one, our maturity as people as we get older, right? That's a huge part of it. Because back in the beginning of following you on Twitter, I believe I saw you say to somebody, if you're going to say something like that to me, I'm going to ask you to find a meeting place. And that used to be you. And now I can see, much like myself, you kind of fighting those instincts a little bit to try to be smarter, right? Yeah. Is that part of it?
Yeah. And it was... I kind of laid off that even before I got the job with The Ringer. It was just, you get to a certain age and things just don't matter the same.
Right. Right.
It just doesn't. It's like, what are we doing, like, fighting about this? Like it's none of it's ever that serious. We're arguing over people we don't know. Over companies we don't work for, to the point where we want to come to blows. And I think what I'm still adjusting to, I've always been taught, as a young kid, once you call somebody outside of their name, like, you are inviting them to a fight. Whether or not you actually leave the door open or not, you sent out the invitation. And so I know that's what I approach it from. And so I try to stay away from that. But I'm also learning that, we're not all the same. We didn't all grow up the same. We don't all see name calling as disrespect. And so a lot of it was like, okay, Cam, like, they don't, you're cut from different cloths. Like, you are literally different people. And so you can't always assume that violence is the thing that they want. And where was it ever really going to go? You know what I mean? Like, there's no sense in being the toughest guy on social media. Like, what are we doing?
Well, we don't want to talk about, all negative stuff. We are wrestling fans. And I came to know you working on the Torch. You were on the East Coast cast, which Man, I remember I was a big Torch guy. Like I had so much respect for Wade, and Bruce Mitchell was actually my first friend in wrestling, like many years ago, and I haven't talked to him in years. But I remember the East Coast cast was a special show because y'all would just go on forever.
Yes, yes. That's it used to. And now it's been broken up into 2 shows, I think, kind of for that reason. But yeah, man, especially like even before I got there, you're talking like a 4 or 5 hour block where they're just going because, you know, it's on the VIP side of the Torch where you can record as long as you want. So what Travis would do was they would have their block on Blog Talk Radio, which would either be an hour and a half to 2 hours. And then at the end of it, you'd be like, stay tuned for VIP. And they would just carry over and keep going. And so eventually it became like, I would do the first hour and a half, and then he and Rich would jump on and do another 2 to 3 hours. And then like in its final days, it was me and him doing the hour and a half, and then him and Rich would go and record the second half like later. But yeah, that was Travis, man. Travis just wanted to go. He wanted to talk about everything under the sun in the world. And it was like, yeah, 4 or 5 hour show every week. The energy to do that is astounding. Absolutely. It's
funny, those names, you know, I remember Travis, and I got to know Rich. I got to meet Rich, and Rich and I did a couple shows together. Love Rich. What a great guy. And this all started us as fans. You know, we were fans, and when you get on a show like this, people ask, when was the first time you watched wrestling? Yeah. I did. Why it ended? We ask that every time. But to me, that's not as interesting as this, which is what hooked you? Like, there's something about wrestling, especially almost exclusively as a kid, where something hooked you and there ain't nothing they can do now. You're here forever. Can you think of that moment?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, originally, of course, like you said, start watching it. You know, I used to watch with my father, with my grandfather, like every, you know, Saturday night. We do the WCW Saturday night thing. But what really got me, my parents got divorced when I was like 4 or 5, and my mother was an airman in the Air Force. I always assumed if you were in the Air Force, you were just rich because you're in the military. You're a G.I. Joe. You're rich, right? No, not the case. So, you know, my mom's an airman in the Air Force, and she gets a part-time job at the Capitol Center. You're familiar. You were in Richmond, so Capitol Center in Landover.
Oh, absolutely.
So she used to take me on her shifts during the week. And I remember she took me to a WWF house show. And it was Hogan and Flair headlining it, and went to a no contest. But yeah, that was it, man. It was the size of everything, the scope of everything. You know, I'm 5. I'm a little tiny guy, just hanging out in the aisles, watching everybody go crazy.
What year was that?
Man. That was 91, I want to say.
That's crazy, dude. I saw the same tour in LA, in Los Angeles. I was in Los Angeles time. I believe that was the 3rd time Hogan and Flair met. And I think they did like a false finish, like a dusty finish where Flair won. And then Valentine, for some reason, ran in and corrected the ref. Do you remember any of the details of that match at all?
Could not tell you the details. No, could not tell you. I remember looking at them, but the details, no.
So it's that live experience that really hooked you. You saw it live as a kid. And then how did that interest grow? Like, did you just start, especially then, there was so much wrestling you could watch. Did you just start watching as much as you could?
One thing that I appreciated about my stepdad was the nerdiest guy in the whole world. He used to, you know, he recorded every episode of Star Trek ever made. He tons of comic books. We had Stephen King books everywhere.
Oh, he's that guy. You got like libraries of video cassettes in your house.
Yes, yes, in brown casing. It's like brown and burgundy casing.
Are they labeled fastidiously?
Yes. And then like if it's like a movie that he had that's like in the mix, he would literally draw box art on an index card to look like the actual box art of what he recorded.
Okay, I'm gonna let you continue, but here's the question though.
Yeah.
Did he do the SLP where he could fit 3 movies on it, or did he want the high quality and do SP where you fit 1 movie on it?
It was typically 1 movie a tape. He wasn't doubling up. Yeah.
Nope.
But what was cool about it, like it wasn't just that, but he also was like 3-sport athlete. So like he ran track, he did boxing, he did a little bit of football growing up. And so my thing was, you know, he's into all the nerdy stuff that I'm like, that you're supposed to be into as a kid, that, you know, they say is for kids. And so for me, it was just like, well, evidently I can be into this stuff that I like this media stuff like wrestling.
Right.
But I can also go do the kid stuff and play ball and lift weights. And so it was always for me just seeing a successful adult maintain their childhood hobbies. I felt like I never had to get rid of a childhood hobby. So I just stuck with it, you know, like the comics were his thing. And I just, every Monday, every Saturday, I'm going to watch wrestling. It just, it was just real natural to me to maintain the hobbies I had as a kid. Like even as time went on, I never felt like I had to leave them. So it was just always watch wrestling.
There's a huge difference between watching wrestling and then eventually becoming such a fan that you want to be, you know, a content creator. You know, what do you see as the bridge to that? Was it just doing more content? Like, I have to admit, doing podcasts on wrestling got me more involved in wrestling. Was just getting involved with the torch the bridge, or was there something before that that kind of said, okay, this is something I don't just want to do or watch, I want to be a part of?
Yeah. So, I mean, I went to college originally for broadcast journalism.
Oh, wow.
And ended up getting my degree in English from the University of Texas. And when I graduated, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. You know, I didn't want to teach right away, and ended up like dating a teacher or somebody who was on the path to be a teacher. And it just became a thing where like, we can't both do this. We can't both come home stressed every single day of our lives and trade war stories, right? So what happened was once I graduated, a bunch of my buddies had moved away. I had just got like my first, you know, big time job, and I was still really into watching wrestling, but you know, I don't have anybody to watch it with. So I got on the internet. I'm like reading wrestling websites. Yes. I found out those existed, right? And I come across the Torch one day, and I kid you not, I come across the Torch, and then I come across the East Coast Cast. And I was like, this sounds like me talking to my friends about wrestling. And so what got me, I used to call into that show. Like I was a caller, like, and you know, I just evidently the things I called in and asked about and talked about, you know, got Travis and Dre's attention to the point where I would do the guest spots co-hosting, and then I was regularly co-hosting. And, you know, during this same time, I'm actually blogging. South Congress blog, and I'm just writing about, you know, what's going on in the world, pop culture. I do, you know, every now and again, I write about what I think's going on in wrestling. And yeah, and that became me at the Torch, doing the Torch thing. And it just grew from there. Like it was never, ever I want to do this as a profession. It never crossed my mind. It was like, okay, I'm going to do some podcasting about wrestling. And then me and my best friend who passed away, we were doing our South Congress podcast, talking about, you know, pop culture, what's going on in the world. And eventually, you know, I started doing more stuff with the Torch. Like Wade would invite me on to do the Raw post show, SmackDown post show, Flagship. You know, and then I'm like, hey, Wade, I want to do a VIP show. And I did You, Me, and Wrestling, which funny enough is very similar to what you're doing right now. So Matt, it was never like, I don't even know if there was a bridge. It was never a thing where this is what I want to do as a profession. It was just, I'm making content. People respond well to it. You know, I'll just keep making it. And every time I'd get a new idea, I would go to Wade, or I'd go to Travis, or I'd reach out to like Bruce and be like, hey, I want to do this thing. What do you think about it? What should I do? And I just put it out there and people would like it. Yeah.
Man, the Bruce thing is it's just terrible because, like, you know, I can think of so many good things about him, but when you talk about him, it's like he's defined by the way he doubled down on it. And I just want to say, like, I do wish him the best of luck, and I wish that never happened. I wish he didn't do it, but it's almost like you can't even talk about the guy. You know what I'm saying?
But it's like you said, like, people, they stand on these firm lines about things, right? And let me say this, what Bruce did was absolutely wrong. Like, I'm not, I'm not saying that it wasn't. But,
and it's very much in Bruce's character to double down on some shit too.
Absolutely,
you know, like,
absolutely.
Like he did that with me when I worked with Russo. You know, that's why our friendship ended. But he's not like this terrible human being. You know.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, and Bruce is still my man. And I tell people, you know, unapologetically, like, Bruce Mitchell is my man. I owe a lot of the idea that you can write about wrestling, like even the idea,
right?
Like, I owe that to Bruce. And so, you know, I used to tell him about, you know, I got this gig, I'm writing about this. Like Bruce was very, very influential in what I do, and I credit him as a mentor. And yeah, like you said, you and his relationship, not great. That to me, that's y'all, and it can just be that, and it doesn't affect ours. And I wish people on social media would be like that. They don't have to side with people. They can understand your perspective as somebody who does not deal with them, and have their own relationship with them. You know, it could just be that.
It's one of these interesting things in society / you know, social media, where there's a line that we do not know how to draw on yet between a bad person and someone fucking up, you know. And it's one of the, it's not like if I saw Bruce, I'd greet him as a friend, he'd greet me as a friend for sure. But at the same time, the social media world, you got to hold yourself accountable sometimes.
Absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely.
And you know, moving on though, you know, and again, it's a hard subject. It's almost something I don't want to talk about because it's going to get headlines and people are going to be, you know, you know. But let's go back to the natural evolution of you calling in to East Coast Cast. Now you're a writer with the Ringer, but you called in. One of my best wrestling friends, his name's Shuli, and Shuli was a caller on the Howard Stern show, and 2-3 years later, he's on the Howard Stern show for decades. So those kind of things can happen. I heard you say on Twitter the other day, someone asked, what kind of music you like? And you said, mostly music made by black people, right?
I did say that.
And you know, as someone who teaches music to kids, I'm try to put in as many kinds of music as I want. And in particular, I will say, man, all your songs are too white. We gotta put something else in there, because just to expose them to that music, right?
Absolutely.
But it's a whole different thing, I think, I'm just guessing, between, you know, you listening to East Coast Cast, you weren't calling into Bruce Mitchell, you weren't calling into Wade Keller, you are very drawn to, attracted to, or whatever, people who you think are going to hear your viewpoint and people whose viewpoint you're going to hear, and a lot of times people draw that along racial lines.
They do. I think with me, you know, I'm a kid who grew up in Southern Maryland. You know, I used to sit in classrooms where if there's 32 kids in the class, 30 of them are black. You know what I mean? Like, even though I grew up military, you know, I come from these big family reunions and cookouts, and you know, it just all the music I not all the music, like most of the music I grew up listening to. You're listening to R&B, you're listening to rap, you're listening to soul. Being in Texas, you know, living out here since middle school, you know, I do listen to some country. Like I like glam rock. I like 80s music. I was listening to some Phil Collins yesterday. For the most part, like if you go through my phone, 90% of it is going to be music by black people, you know, but everybody makes good music. I just don't always have it on, but for sure.
Right. I mean, but it's clearly better, you know, but still, you know.
but in relation to like the East Coast Cast, I think what my thing was, I give a lot of credit to Damian Nelson from Pro Wrestling Report. And that's like the first black person I ever saw like get in front of a camera, sitting at a news set, real professional, like real proper, real about his business, talk about pro wrestling, right? And this is when I'm like, I don't know, like 19, 20, I'm watching him get on there and just kill it. And, you know, I'm 19, 20. Like, I'm a kid. So then when I hear, you know, 25, 26-year-old Travis and Dre get on there like talking that talk, I'm like, yeah, this is me. This is my speed right here. And you know, it adjusts over time. Like I do feel like even with the East Coast Cast over time, we really did kind of tone down what we would put out into the world. Because what's funny, we used to get a little annoyed with Wade. Like we would do a whole show and we would consciously not say any curse words, and it would still get like the explicit content notification on there. It's like, come on, man, we're trying. But we did want to eventually like appeal to a larger audience. And so we did kind of cut back on like that kind of talk. It did, but no, it's absolutely what drew me to it. Cause like I'm I'm kind of a foul mouthed guy. Like I cuss like a sailor, right? I come up around like a bunch of military people and sharecroppers. You know what I mean? Like hey, that's what I do. But no, we've tried to clean it up. But initially, yes, it was the free flowing, say what's on your mind, like have an attitude. You know, drop a bomb here or there. Like that was what initially did draw me to it. Yeah.
How does that affect you as a wrestling fan, as a black wrestling fan? Because you said something on Twitter the other day. Someone's asked like, hey, Cam, is it okay if I do this? Like a white guy, you know? And you're like, I'm not your racial referee, right?
I did say that.
Which is hilarious, first of all. And second of all, it's like there are some earnest people out there who are ignorant. A lot of us are ignorant about, you know, what to say and when to say it. But a lot of those people just don't do the research or don't try or don't talk to somebody. Where do you draw the line in like, well, this is an opportunity to educate somebody versus come on, man, just let me live my fucking life. You know, like where do you draw that line?
I feel like I know when it comes from a good place. You know, I tell you what, if it's asked in the NGL, it's not coming from a good place. But you can imagine
never is.
You can imagine how many DMs I get like of a similar vein of like, you know, white fans or non-black fans asking about something I've seen, if I think it's okay, if I think it's cool. And to me, like that's the place to educate. Like when I get into like a Twitter back and forth about something that happened like with a black talent, you know, somebody black in wrestling or person of color in either of those situations, and they're like, well, explain it to me, and I'm like, no, like this is not, if this is something you genuinely wanted to know about, you would reach out. This is not something that's meant to be played out in public. Like this is a private conversation, and I've seen that work both ways, Matt. Like there's this idea on Twitter that every misstep that a person makes on Twitter is supposed to have this very large public explanation and apology. And it's like, no, we're real people. Like people mess up and you can explain to them why they messed up. And sometimes the apology is them not doing it again. And people just treat that like the strangest thing. Like it's funny. You talk about it, Matt. You talk about how, when do I draw the line? Listen, and I mean this, and I'm probably not going to put it into the exact right words because I have an editor now who helps me with that. But let me say this. One thing that I've learned very much on social media, specifically wrestling Twitter, the IWC, is that there is a certain demographic of fan who feels they are owed answers. And that certain demographic, just from what I've seen, tends to be a little bit older than me, shares gender with me, and is a little bit lighter than me.
So guys like me, pretty much, guys like me.
But genuinely, like there's just this idea that you owe them an explanation for everything you think, everything you do or don't do, and it shocks them when you don't give that to them. And I think that, again, not knowing these people as individuals, like as a black man in America, that happens a lot.
Yeah.
The white guy, either in charge or who feels like he's in charge, just demands answers and satisfaction from you and just cannot understand why you wouldn't give it to him. And I hope that's the thing that I'm educating people on as we traverse the Twitter highways. Yeah, I don't owe you an explanation for any damn thing.
Right. You know, and for those white people out there like me, just if finding out what your racial sensibilities are by asking the black guy you know on Twitter who follows wrestling, probably not the best way to go about it. Is it, Cam?
You have other friends. You have actual friends. You should go through your 2 or 3 white homies first and ask them if it's okay to ask.
Workshop it maybe a little bit.
Exactly. Oh, man.
So you talked about The Ringer. You're a writer for The Ringer. It's an unusual thing in today's day and age. I guess Substack is coming along. But how did you arrive at writing? Because you have such a great voice, literally, figuratively. Your experience seemed to be in talking, although you do have a degree in English, and also, you know, content. People think about content as video, audio. They don't really think about the written word. How did you arrive at that?
So, like I said, the writing was always a thing growing up. Always loved to write, you know, write fiction, write short stories. The blogging thing came like right after college. It was just a natural extension of the degree, something I'd always been doing. And so literally, this is what happened. I'm doing the South Congress blog. Mainly it's myself. Every once in a while, my man Brian would contribute and my man Quincy would contribute. But typically it was me a couple of times a week, just writing what's on my mind. And then the Mike Brown murder happened. And I literally couldn't write. I was too upset to write. Just the idea of sitting down, studying long enough to focus on typing out words got really tough. I'm also, you know, first generation Facebook guy. So I wrote a bunch of paragraphs in my life that have fallen on deaf ears. I don't think I've written a long form thing on Facebook in like 10 years because of that, because I realized how it was going. But yeah, the writing was always kind of in the bag. And so I'm doing the podcasting, South Congress podcast, me and my man Peanut. I'm doing the East Coast cast with Travis. And kind of what happened. The East Coast cast is doing, it's doing well. It's doing, you know, thousands of people are listening to an episode. But my thing was always the East Coast cast is Travis's show. This is Wade's baby. Bruce is the man over here. Radican is working his ass off, following the indies. Like everybody has, like Greg Parks is doing his thing. Everybody kind of has a thing. I'm like, am I contributing? Is what I used to ask myself. Am I carrying my weight? And so I want to say the first thing that I wrote long form at the Torch was, I think we called it the Ballad of Kofi Kingston. And what I was really trying to get across, this is right before, this is while Kofi Mania is happening. So what is that, 4 or 5 years ago?
Yeah.
My thing was, looking back at the history of WWE, Vince always had like a soft spot in his heart for the all-American black athlete. Like if you look at your Tony Atlas, your Rocky Johnson's Canadian, but you look at The Rock, you look at Shelton Benjamin, you look at Ron Simmons, it was always him trying to position that all-American black athlete. And now, like, of course, he has that in Bianca Belair. I don't know if he thought that would be the case, right? But Bobby Lashley too. But my thing was, Kofi Kingston is not that. Kofi Kingston is not D1 athlete. He's not amateur wrestler. He's this different thing. So who does Kofi represent? And I kind of really went into depth writing about that. So what happened with that was that got some eyes on it. And so my man Kevin from PWI reached out and was like, hey, I'd love for you to write a feature for us. And I actually got it like behind me, got it framed. My mom framed it, did a thing with Alley Cat. And then I just did something with them a couple of months ago with Hyon and Rachel Rose, two really good indie Texas workers. You've seen Hyon on ROH and Impact. But and then Fanside had reached out and they were like, hey, I love your Twitter. I love your opinions. I'd love to have you come right over here for us. And so, yeah, I think what really happened, I first wrote that long form thing at the Torch. But what happened was people started putting together that what I was writing on Twitter was not just hot take dunk. It was like, like there's, and shout out to Kevin. Shout out to Fansided, because that's the sign of not only a writer, but a good editor. They were looking at the tweets and like, oh, this can be like a long form thing. And I never solicited anybody like, yo, my degree's in this and I can write that. It was always them reaching out to me. And so I credit them like for seeing a talent, because like I said, I was pretty much done writing. Like I even though I did like with the timeline being what it is, I didn't jump back in to write the Kofi thing, but that was like, I'm going to write a one-off here or there if I got to get it out, but it was never supposed to be anything steady. But those guys found me, man. Those guys came and found me.
Right.
And yeah, let me start putting that out there in the world again.
You said Kofi did not fit the mold of what you've seen on WWE TV, you know, the all-American black athlete, you know, not someone that I guess one might say like Vince and them would say, oh, this is an acceptable person to represent us. And Kofi made his own way.
Yeah.
I saw you on Twitter recently say today, the biggest story in wrestling is the writer that sued WWE for, getting fired for objecting to these racial stereotypes. And people are all upset about it. This is not really a surprising revelation, right?
Like, I think as soon as people see lawsuit, they think that like the house is burning down, right? And it's like, guys, we've been here all along. Like,
right.
One thing I always said. So when we were, coming up, I say we were coming up like we're the same age, right? I think about the times when Triple H when he beat Booker T at WrestleMania 19, and when RVD didn't beat him for the title. And it was like, Triple H is a racist, and Triple H does this and that. And I was like, guys, I think you're missing the point. I don't think Triple H is a racist. I think that Triple H knows how to appeal to the people in charge. And I think the people in charge are old white guys. Like, it's not
right.
Everything isn't immediately or automatically insidious, right? Like, sometimes these folks don't know no better. And sometimes not only do they not know no better, but like you said, people will double down on their ignorance. They just will, right? And so, no, to me, this is like a thing that happens in a bunch of workplaces. Yeah. You just don't know about it because you don't work there, and it's not like put out on TV and social media, and it's not $1 billion industry. Like, you know how many times the Hispanic person at your favorite fast food restaurant has been called the wrong name by their white boss and just had to deal with it. And the white boss probably didn't mean nothing by it, but also could have meant something by it, but you don't know nothing about it. Is it wrong? Yeah, it's just kind of how things go. So, hey, we got a lawsuit in place. If they find there was wrongdoing, that individual is going to be taken care of. Hopefully things get better. I don't really know how much deeper you want me to go into it. You know what I mean? Like, like there's the thing where, Bianca was asked to do this, and Bianca, one of the most graceful people I've ever met, navigate any of this stuff. It was like, yo, he wants me to say that. I'm not going to say that. It doesn't fit who I am. And so I if you notice who's having the largest reaction to racial discrimination in WWE, it's people who have never been racially discriminated against. and
we're trying to be empathetic, though.
Yeah, but this is the thing, though. They want to be empathetic, but they're empathetic to a person that somebody whose writing they probably crapped on at one point. You know what I mean? Like, because everything functions off of these extremes. And it's like, okay, we want this thing to get better. Like the idea of down with WWE, down with AEW. When you want a company to go down the drain because of racial discrimination, you're forgetting how many Black people and people of color they actually pay. The lowest level of that company, of most of the companies that you want to go away, are Black and brown people keeping the thing up. If you went to WrestleMania, 99% of the SoFi staff was Black, right?
Right. I was there.
But you want the guy who in charge of SoFi, you want the business to collapse because you don't like something he did? Where are they going to work? Like, people don't think about it on that level. Like, you should want things to improve, not collapse. Are there things you have to tear down in order for things to get better? Yes. WWE is not one of them. It don't work like that.
Well, the issue often appears, you can talk about Jordan Miles or, all the way up to Bianca being asked to take off her earrings to fight. It's, oh my God. But representation is the deal, right? Like having someone in the room. I don't want to say how important is representation, but explain representation changing things maybe to someone who might not understand how big a difference that might make in that room and the product that we see on the screen. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So Black people are just people. Like, it's just people. Like
sure.
Everybody doesn't, and people of every color and race and denomination, they do certain things. Everybody has extremes, right? But if, like, when we were doing an event for WrestleMania, myself, my man Phil Lindsay, Grab City Bleacher Report, and my man Emilio Sparks, producer of Renee Paquette's podcast and Wrestle Rap. So we're writing a show at Sirius for some Black WWE talent. And it's Mello and Trick, Omos and MVP, and Top Dollar and Ashanti the Adonis. So we're writing the show, and I'm realizing after we put everything on paper, we don't know a lot about Ashanti. Like, we know Top Dollar,
sure,
NFL guy, rapper. Right. Mello and I are tight, so I've been following Mello, so I can get in there and talk to you about Mello wrestling in the Northeast, things he's gone through in NXT. Trick played ball at South Carolina, so I got to know Trick like on that level. Omos, I've hung out with him a few times. We've talked about his college basketball career in Nigeria, and of course MVP, this long story career. Talk to you about those guys. I say, Ashanti, can I talk to you for a second? He's like, yeah. So we go off, and I'm like, look, man, we're writing this down. I got to admit, I do not know a lot about you. Can we just rap for like 15, 20 minutes?
Right.
So we do that. Come to find out, he's like a multiple-time war vet, right? So, okay, I'm cranking it out. And so if you go and listen to DJ Who Kid's Serious episode with the WWE wrestlers, everything you hear him talk about Ashanti being a military vet and going to war, that's all me putting that in there, right? And so how much does representation matter? Representation matters because if he goes out to an interview or on set, he's going to talk about WWE and his experience. But now, because somebody probed him deeper than what's on the surface, now he's going to get conversations about the military, his time at war, the discipline, like all that's going to come out because somebody who knows that Black people aren't a monolith went to him and needed to know about him. All right. So you get some of us in these writing rooms and in creative. It's not just going to be about what do I picture you as? It's going to be who are you and how can we bring that part of you out, And so like there is an inherent desire in Black people when it comes to dealing with each other to make connections and to accentuate that. Like when we get together and we see each other and it's how you doing? What's up? Good to see you. I'm trying to get like you. That's not like just talk. That really is, right. I see the positivity in your life. What can I do to bring that out for me? And so, yeah, it really is just about, you're going to have a deeper conversation about who this person is with more Black people in the room. Like, I tell you what, they got a lady over there right now. Her name is Tavia, who is basically like, it's weird to say all WWE stars have like agents now, but she's basically like the road manager. And I met her at Sirius and we hung out at Wale Mania and like a couple of times that weekend, and like having like a Black woman who can talk to everybody and be in every room and still like kick it with the wrestlers, and they look at her like a big sister. I've never seen that in any capacity in wrestling, being around these people. And I think it's the smartest thing I've ever seen because everybody's so relaxed and natural. Right. She can take care of whatever they need, but not in the sense of she's serving you. She's like, I got you. Let's make it happen. It's amazing. I'm blown away by who she is and what she does. And even them putting her in position to do that. Don't know whose idea it was. You're a genius, though. Seriously.
Well, you know, I swear I did not bring you on just to talk about race or, you know, but it's where the conversation went. And with wrestling, you know, there's a lot of good in wrestling. We all here with the IWC, that's what we're here to talk about, content creation and our connections as fans and friends through wrestling. Let me ask you this. When is wrestling to you at its absolute best?
It's at its absolute best when kids are screaming for it.
That's fantastic.
Genuinely, like we're at the Royal Rumble and we're in the press box, and you know everybody's there, from you know Busted Open to my man Keith. I always forget Keith's last name. Keith with the long hair and the beard. You know, you got Fightful's there, and Sports Illustrated is there, and 2K's in the whole front row. And Bray Wyatt is about to have that Mountain Dew Pitch Black match with LA Knight.
Right,
and
right.
Everybody kind of groans or looks down at their computer or goes to their phones, and the little kids directly in front of us are screaming their heads off. And they care about everything in the match, and they want to make sure Uncle Howdy is okay after the match. And I was like, it's perfect. It's perfect. Like, I would love for adults and kids together to all love and worship the same thing. I realized at that moment our feelings did not matter. Wrestling is at its very best when it's a big enough spectacle to where kids get wide-eyed and want their parents to take them to it.
I totally agree in the sense that I put out on Twitter a while ago, like, when did you first become a fan? Because it was really a leading question, because I really knew. Is it possible to draw new fans that aren't kids, or should they just really, I mean, when you pander to kids won't get that. We know that. You know, I know you're a teacher, I work with kids, but are they wasting their time not trying to just get new fans from kids as opposed to trying to draw new fans as adults?
Drawing a new fan as an adult is almost entirely reliant on you already having an adult in that circle that's a fan.
Right, right.
Like, I don't know if there's something like, I said it before, Roman Reigns would have to walk on water for wrestling to get back to 5-6 million people watching a show. And Roman Reigns, for as great as he is a human. Like, it's just not built like that. So I think that, like, for me, I can bring my friends to wrestling because they know, one, like how much I love it, two, that I work in it, and now my friends are starting to get to go and see the friends that I've introduced them to wrestle. So, like, I can take 5, 6, 7, 8 people to an AEW show in Austin because they get to see their man Rick, who they hang out with on the weekends. You know what I mean?
Right, right.
But, like, as an adult, I don't know if there's a way that they can bring new people in. Like again, like Roman Reigns. Women love looking at Roman Reigns. They love him. They see him on TikTok and they see him on Twitter and they go crazy. The numbers are good, but it's not happening in droves to where that's making a big dent. And so, yeah, when they do something like a Mountain Dew Pitch Black match, which is specifically not for us, if you're selling that Bray Wyatt merch whenever you do it, then it's a win. What's happening is supposed to happen. So, yeah, I think they should, you know, skew younger whenever they get a chance. Like, but it's funny. They should do it. But, like, I don't need Bianca Belair to have an edge about her. What she's doing is perfect. Sure. You see, like, little girls wearing giant braids that they made their parents buy to shows. You know what I mean? Like, that's there. Even like a Cody, who is, like, dead serious, they're selling out of Cody merch at every show they go to, and most of those shirts are mediums and smalls. Like, it's working. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think they should definitely have like these wholesome characters and some silly characters, because if you're not dead in the water with adults, but the way that you do it, I don't think is through TV. It has to be other avenues. Like, what you're going to do is you're not going to get more adults to all of a sudden watch the show, but you're going to create these larger price points with this exclusive access that gets adults to stuff. And I'm actually writing about that currently. So yeah, that's kind of the way to touch that part of the fan base.
It's a dedicated fan versus large fan base kind of approach, right?
Absolutely.
You get the dedicated fan, AEW's got them, they'll fly to events. But if you're trying to grow the audience, like with the kids that I work with, I'd say rarely I see a wrestling shirt. And usually it's a AEW shirt, and usually it's Danhausen, or it's Orange Cassidy, or it's Darby Allin, like those guys. And the opportunity AEW has to lean into those kind of characters, just like WWE has with Bray Wyatt and other characters that appeal to kids. I think it's something that's missed in today's wrestling because, like you said, Roman Reigns isn't over-the-top cartoonish. He's not going to draw on those people the way an Angle like the NWO would, or the way a cartoonish character like Hulk Hogan would. And my son started watching wrestling with a show called Saturday Morning Slam. Do you remember that at all?
I'm familiar. Yes.
And the Usos were the stars of Saturday Morning Slam, man. They were on every single week. It was like, I guess maybe to them, it was like a C-tier show. But for kids, like, I think it drew them in. I think maybe, especially nowadays, with streaming and YouTube, ask a kid what their favorite TV show is. They'll look at you like you're stupid.
Yeah.
They watch YouTube. They watch Netflix. If you could take some of those hours you put on YouTube and dedicate it to something that attracts kids in, that would probably be a worthwhile venture, I think.
Absolutely. And like you said, like AEW's got like when they get healthy at the same time, I think Top Flight has the opportunity to be in that, like that Danhausen, Darby Allin mode where these kids can just do the craziest things you've ever seen and are so graceful. Like you talk about with the Usos, like the Usos were bright colors, choreographed dance. It was that, and they matured over time because I feel like, and I always say this, the insertion of American Alpha is the best thing that ever happened to the Usos, because they had an edge about them when American Alpha showed up, so they wouldn't get passed up, and they just took off. But yeah, I do think some of these acts that you are starting off on the main roster, you can gear them as they're younger to kids and let them mature over time. Like I think like Montez Ford, we did an event at the Boys and Girls Club, and they went nuts for him specifically because he's a giant kid. You know what I mean? Like, that's going to work. But, just put Omos on TV more. You put Omos on TV more, you'll get kids, because adults go crazy looking up at him. Kids lose it when they see that guy. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Angelo Dawkins. I think Montez is great, but I think people sleep on Angelo. He's probably my favorite. He's my number one answer when people ask me who's underrated these days. No,
you talk about some synergy. So when I saw Dawkins at that same event, I was like, hey, I wrote a thing about Dax a couple of months ago, and he just raves about you, and he thinks that you are fantastic. And he really took that to heart. And yeah, we've seen him improve to the point where like those talks about him being a Jannetty are over with. They're done, because he's so good. And think about Dawkins that people don't get. He's so big. And I don't know if he has like that test Jack Swagger thing where I know that you're big, but it doesn't make sense until I'm right up next to you.
There's a few of them, yeah. Yeah,
but he has that about him. And listen, they talk about what's my man's name? Braun Strowman. They talk about Braun Strowman and his opinions on the other workers, and you got to go out and get it yourself. Braun Strowman, him eating that shoulder block from Dawkins might be the nicest thing he's ever done for somebody. I think that thing's going to live on forever. So
right.
Absolutely.
You talked about Omos, who you've hung out with. You talk about your friend Rick, who I believe is Ricky Starks. One thing, as you start to get involved in content creation, like I have and you have, is you form relationships with some of these wrestlers. How does your fanship change? And also, like, how does what comes out of your mouth and also out of your pen change with these personal relationships? There are times where I'm about to tweet something and I'm like, well, Drew McIntyre's going to see this. Maybe I shouldn't. You know what I'm saying? Like, how do things change for you as you develop these relationships?
The flashpoint was New Year's Eve 2021. So we had a party at, it was like the Hyatt or the Sheraton or so, I don't know. But like it's me, some of my buddies, my girl, their girls, and I invited Rick. So, Rick's on his way to come hang out. We got the champagne, we got music on, all that. And Tony Khan makes a tweet about Big Swole's appearance on a podcast.
New Year's Eve, the famous New Year's Eve tweet. Yeah.
Yeah. So Rick shows up to the hotel and I look at him and he looks at me, and I kid you not, we go off in the corner for an hour to talk about it. And the largest part of the conversation, what my point was that it doesn't matter if he feels like this. He can't say it because of the power dynamics. You're going to have people who are going to dogpile on her. One, because you are their wrestling savior in their minds. Two, because it's what happens to Black women. Like both of these things. And I have never said, I do not think that any of that was Tony Khan's intention. I don't. I think he's actually kind of removed from that part of thinking, right?
Well, he gets defensive, he gets defensive. For
sure. Mm-hmm.
And then it didn't think about the ramifications of what he said.
Exactly.
And I, for one, wish that Leo Rush was also at that party with you, quite honestly.
That would have been something. Yeah, but it really was like, again, I did not think it was malicious, but, we can have a conversation, me and Rick, and Rick can't say whether he thinks she's right or whether she's wrong in any type of public space. So what really changed that night for me was like, okay, you have relationships with these people. And I think the clearest thing about me and Ricky, that's not a relationship from wrestling. Like that is, we were friends for a year and a half before I even got the job at the Ringer. And so that was like, but he knew what I did for the Torch. He knew that I wrote, but it was always like, whatever we talk about is what we talk about,
Right.
But you're right. So what happened after the Swole thing, it also became, because Swole and I have a relationship. So it also became a thing where people started asking me about Ricky. Like, what's Ricky doing? Does he like his spot? Is he happy? Is he sad? Does he want to leave? Does he want a more prominent role? And it's like, I'm not telling you that. Like, yo, what are you doing? Like, that is not that's not the nature of our relationship to divulge that. And I'm not going to put my man in a strange position. And so, yeah, what has happened though, and I'll admit this, and this is, again, not from the job, but from meeting more people. Like once I stand in a room and shake your hand, even if I'm critical of you, I got to run it through, I got to put it through a different pipe. You know what I mean? Like this has to come across different. Like, I just feel like it's a crazy kind of disrespect for me to smile in your face and then talk about you crazy through the computer. So seriously, so it's way less like this person sucks or this is no good. And I think I got away from that period, like you suck or you're not that great, or it's like, yo, if I got to say that, I don't got to say nothing at all. Like I hate to bring it back to elementary school, but what good does it do me to say something bad about you? What good does it do you? Like I remember, I think I tweeted something about like not telling people they're trash or what did you ever say to make a wrestler mad? And Dak Draper tweeted me and he was like, yo, you told me my promo was trash 5 years ago on NXT. And I was mad about it for years. And I was like, oh wow, I had no idea. And so, yeah, it just kind of became a thing where, you got to monitor your surroundings. I don't want to be, yeah, you got it.
Have you ever gotten that mad DM or mad text from someone from something you said? Because that's happened to me a couple times. A couple times it's things I don't even remember I said. That's
the worst part. Because I'm saying stuff like one off, like random. I've never I've never had like a wrestler or anybody in media specifically do that. I have had somebody hit me like bad take, Cam. That's not actually what's going on. I was like, oh, my bad. I'll pull back on that. But no, I haven't really had that. And I think mostly because I'm so far removed from being critical in that way of an individual. Like a match not being good, I think is a fair criticism that nobody gets upset about, because if it don't work, it don't work. But no, I think that my individual criticisms of people are so few and far between. And the biggest reason is because it's not because of relationships. But what I saw was I was starting to say the same stuff as people I don't respect.
Right.
That's what got me. I was like, oh, this is how I sound? I'm coming across like this? Nah, gonna wipe it. Do not need to be part of that crew or that circle or that line of folks. No, sir.
So can't thank you enough for joining us. I do have just a couple more questions, but again, Cameron Hawkins, known as Seahawk on Twitter. You can find him on The Ringer. You're going to find him some other places, I'm sure. And those places probably have a bit to do with content creation. So with content creation, I used to hate that term, but now I'm kind of embracing it a little bit. You know, what's worked for you, you've said, you know, being true to yourself, but also evolving. Like you just said, I don't do this sucks, that doesn't suck that much, or I don't do that. That's not, the critical thing is not really me. That's worked for you. Is that your best advice for content creation as far as developing a persona or of developing a voice? Is be true to yourself, or is it more about just evolving into being what's needed?
I think being what's needed. I think that carries a bit more weight for me. I got a buddy. His name is Squints. And Squints is starting out in podcasting, and you know his thing. He wants to interview wrestlers. That's what he wants to do. And he would come to me for advice. And there was one time where he tweeted like something like just trashing a wrestler. And I said, yo, like you should take that down, because you might never want to talk to him, but if you want to talk to his man or you want to talk to his tag team partner or you want to talk to his manager, you don't want to burn that bridge. And what happened was people were pushing back against that, against me saying that, because their thing was, oh, you're trying to play it safe and you don't want to ruffle feathers. And this is what I didn't have to say it. Other people said it. So one person who was leading that charge, and they'll go nameless, but they're like a professional entertainer, and they come from old money. And people rightfully told them, you don't have to be weary of relationships or what you say or how you say it, because you're set regardless. Like other people have rules to follow. And so there was that. And then the other portion of people who were pushing back are Twitter edgelord podcasts that doesn't use their real name or doesn't use their real face. Yeah. And it's like, you know, I understand like you're the want to be, you know, that person and you think it's funny and, you know, your buddies get a kick out of it when you do it. But some of us are living real lives out here, and we are going to be in rooms with people. Like we're going to be in meetings with people. We're going to be doing business with people. And if that is your goal, like if you want to get rich off of content creation, maybe you'll hit the algorithm on YouTube. Great. Have fun. Like, I love the guys at, who's my guys in the UK, man? I always forget their name. What Culture? Love What Culture. Yeah. Love them dudes.
They figured that shit out, didn't they?
Yeah. Okay, but this is the thing about them. They went to Wale Mania, and everybody's backstage and having fun and having drinks and kicking it. They stood right there at the backdrop for about an hour and a half, waited till the Usos could come out, did their interview, and then went about their business. And God bless them for it. And those guys are cool. I really like them. But the thing that they're trying to do is not have those relationships, and they don't want to kick it. A lot of people want to kick it. They want to be around. They want it to be casual. And if that's what you want, like, you got to play it a different way. and you're probably not going to hit the algorithm like what, and you're not going to work as hard as What Culture or these other groups. Like there are a lot of people who make content who are in there all day, graphics and video and editing and all that. Most people do not have that drive. So if you're looking to be, hey, I want to do a weekly podcast and I want to talk to wrestlers, or I want to, have a live stream where people jump on and all that. Your relationships got to be in place. They got to be tight. And like you said, it's got to be something that people want. Like the reason that I'm in the position I am is because so few people were writing about the wrestlers as people. Like they were talking about favorite match, favorite wrestler, favorite moment, which is dope. There's always going to be a need for that. But people weren't writing about the stores that Ricky Starks likes to shop at. They weren't writing about how Melo compares NXT to a college setting. You know what I mean? They weren't writing about what Tony Storm is actually trying to build in AEW. Like that wasn't there. And so I found that there are people who do want to read about the wrestler's mindset and what's in their heart, not what's in their heart, like what did they give back, but what's pushing them, what's driving them. You know what I mean? Like there is room for that. So if you're going to do the weekly podcast talking to wrestlers, you got to have new questions. Like I told my man Squints, I'm like, yo, I'll help you with whatever. Maybe you want to ask this. Maybe you want to ask that. Here, take that. I don't want no money for it. I just want you to succeed because I do want this thing to keep getting larger. But yeah, they say that the bubble's about to burst on this thing, and I don't think the bubble's going to burst as long as the content stays fresh. But it's got to be something people aren't used to.
Innovation, like I was pitched so many things when Dax and I stopped the podcast. Like I was pitched recap shows. I'm like, no, man, what am I going to do? Do that better than like Sean or, what am I going to do? Nick Hausman just started something to do that. Then I was pitched like, interviews every week. And I'm like, man, I don't do that either. There's so many people do that, So one of the reasons I started this was because I saw a niche. I saw something that was a niche. I look at the Venn diagram of success I've seen, which is what you're good at, what you can make money at, what you're passionate about, and what the world needs, and see where it intersected. And that's where it intersected for me. And that's why I'm doing this. I'm still not even sure what the show is, quite honestly, but I want to thank you for being on the first episode. And also want to ask you this as the last question. If you mentioned hard work, and if you'll notice, guys out there, Cam and I have pretty much a few of the same critics, and these are the critics. A lot of them are the ones who sit in a corner while someone else is with their girl and saying it should be me, and there's a couple of those out there, right? Because they're not willing to do the work, I guess I put it differently, but what advice would you give to content creators, or if you want to comment on that too, but what advice would you give to content creators out there?
This is what I always say, and you help me kind of go down the timeline, but specifically, I started blogging in 2009. I started wrestling podcasting in 2010. I had a show every week from 2010 until the end of 2022.
Right.
I've had my own podcast that ran basically adjacent to that for at least 6 or 7 years. I've written, like, this is a almost 15-year journey to get to the point where someone would want to reach out to me and have me write. So, like, did I tell you why I don't like lists, Matt?
I know you don't like lists, but I don't know why you don't like lists.
I don't like lists because I could make a list of my 100 favorite ice creams right now, and somebody would say, what about butter pecan? Lists do this thing where while they do get people talking,
they lock you in.
They let untalented people jump onto a talented person's coattails and with their input.
Right.
And not even just untalented, but the people who don't try, the people who don't have the idea to create the things themselves, all of a sudden get to leech onto that and feel like they've done something. So I think lists are perfectly fine, but for me, they annoy me. But the biggest thing is this, like you said, yes, Matt, there are people who both don't like you and don't like me. And a part of that is absolutely based on level of access. Part of it's based on people just liking us. And that really does bother people because they're like, yeah, why not me? What about me? I'm cool too. You might be. There's nothing cool about you hating, though. That's the first thing you should stop doing. Like, there are so many people working in this space. I don't got time to knock nobody else. Like, there was a guy I had a bad interaction with years ago, and I saw him WrestleMania weekend, and we ended up like working on stuff together because he was showing love. So I was the one carrying that. He never even thought about that interaction as being bad. And I felt so small in the moment. So like, yeah, what I recommend to you, one, put in the work. And I hope you don't have to work 15 years for it. I hope you get what's coming to you in a month. I hope you get it in a week. I hope it works. But you put in the work, you treat people right. And when I say treat people right, I'm not cool with people in wrestling so I can get scoops or so I can break news. I'm cool because I'm a fan of what they do. And oftentimes they turn out to be good people with similar life experiences, similar outlooks, and we can use that to build. And I think when you come from a place where you're not just trying to get over on somebody, the content just comes and the words just flow and it becomes easy. So build relationships, but build relationships as you, not as somebody trying to take, not as somebody, trying to get over. Build it as who you are, and the content comes from there.
Wow, that is great advice. We're going to leave it right there. Cameron Hawkins, I can't thank you enough for joining us. Of course, find his writing on The Ringer, the last article on Lita. It's fantastic work. Lots of great articles on there. Follow him on Twitter at Seahawk. What else are you up to these days that you want to talk about? Anything else?
Man, I'm working on a project with an article that I did for Pro Wrestling Illustrated called Hearts of Texas about High On and Rachel Rose and the feud they've had on the indies. Working with an artist, Laura Moran, to make like a short infographic series on their rivalry. It's based on this old Street Fighter 2 strategy guide that I had. So I'm super excited about that.
Great.
As it goes on, it depends on the talent, but more and more of the interviews I'm doing for these articles are going to be made into podcast form. My most recent one, I talked to Brian Danielson, I apologize, for about an hour before his Iron Man match with MJF. And so that's available if you go to South Congress with a K on SoundCloud, or South Congress with a K, anywhere that you listen to podcasts. That's really fun. Working on this article with On Location, who basically does like the VIP services for WWE events. Got to talk to some really cool people. O'Shea Jackson Jr., Cleo Thomas, different wrestlers that were in the area. So really cool thing with them. And we're still working out the kinks. But if you've noticed, AEW might be having a very specific main event for Double or Nothing. Wouldn't it be cool if you got to read a little series about the people in the main event of Double or Nothing? Wait and see.
Well, this show hopefully will come out Wednesday and everything will be shown to light. Cam, I can't thank you enough for joining us this week on the first episode of Wrestling Friends. And everybody follow what he does. And thank you again so much for joining us, dude. Appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me, man. It's nice to finally meet.
Exactly. Buddy, that was a pretty good interview with Seahawk. He is just a super interesting dude, right? Just, you don't find many people in wrestling, wrestling fans who become wrestling content creators who just have such a uniquely awesome viewpoint and just a great way to kind of express things in a different way than we've heard before. And just a great guy. What a great interview. I had a good time. And we hope you had a good time too. We're going to talk just a little bit more before we go. I want to focus on what's positive a little bit. And I want to talk about something I asked Seahawk about. What's right with wrestling today? You know what's great in wrestling today is we're probably seeing the best matches that we've seen on a regular basis on TV. When I was a kid, I talked to Mikey Riprek about this, is that, Because we all remember it who are that age. We got this promo that Hulk Hogan was actually wrestling on TV the next week. Oh my God, Hogan never wrestled on TV. And they said his opponent would be over 300 pounds. Who could it be? Bundy? Could it be John Studd? No, it was Rusty Brooks, who looked like me, I guess, but bald and like 5'10" and over 300 pounds. And those days are long gone. We get good matchups, good matches every single week. There's good wrestling on all the time. If you like matches, this is the time for you. And let me tell you, when FTR got in there with the Briscoes, or, you get a great match with Brian Danielson, man, it's never better than that. It is a great time to be a wrestling fan if you like matches. But what's wrong with wrestling today? Well, I don't want to dwell too much on the negative, because that's all there is out there is negative, right? It seems that way. But like I have said a few times, there's more positive than negative, but the negative pops out to us. And so that's why it's the exception. And it's kind of our tendency to think everything's negative. Like if you see, if you're driving in Maryland and a Maryland driver cuts you off, you're like, Maryland drivers suck. That's kind of our nature as human beings, right? But I do want to talk a little bit about just something negative in wrestling. I just said that it was the best time to be a wrestling fan if you like matches. But matches ain't it. Matches ain't all there is. If matches was it, AEW would be just the biggest wrestling company of all time. Now, the reality is AEW is a overwhelming success, because you can base it off of whatever metrics you want. Do they get a TV deal? Yeah. Are they selling tickets? Yeah. Are they bringing in good wrestlers? Yeah. Everything else is just opinions, but those metrics don't lie. And if you want to get into TV ratings, you can get into TV ratings all you want. And I'll get into TV ratings with you. If you think, and sometimes I think, they could be a little bit higher, right? But if the company, Warner Brothers, is willing to renew their contract, they're the experts, guys, not us. So AEW would be the biggest company in the world if it was just matches. But I can't say this enough, and you're going to hear me say this a lot. Wrestling is best when people care who wins and loses. Look at Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens against the Usos. Look at Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns. Why were they so successful as programs? Because people really cared who won and lost. We know it's a quote-unquote work sport. We know this. We know that it's got a predetermined outcome, but we're along for the ride. Like, if I'm watching the Avengers, I'm not hoping Thanos and them have a great fight. I want Thanos to lose. All right, I really don't, because I got very mixed feelings about Thanos, but we'll talk about that later. But let's go with it. So, at the same time in wrestling, if we go, ooh, great match, it doesn't matter who wins or loses. Let the fans decide, shades of gray, all that. Heels and faces are, I don't like using those terms, but, bad guys and good guys are antiquated terms. Cool, let's do that. Let's not give them names. Let's dress them up in masks. It's not true. We want to care who wins and loses, and it's not that hard to do. That is what's wrong with wrestling today, is focusing on getting the fans behind people, focusing on getting the fans against people. Good guys and bad guys. It's not an antiquated notion. You know why? Because it's in every damn book, ever. Every story ever, since Homer and the Iliad and the Odyssey, through the Bible, through Harry Potter, through the Avengers, there's good guys and bad guys. Now, Stone Cold Steve Austin broke that mold, and everybody said, wow, it doesn't really matter. The NWO broke the mold. Exceptions make the rules, and those are the exceptions, because we've been trying to do it since then, and wrestling popularity, at least, has gone down. So wrestling is best when people care who wins and loses, and that could be done better by anybody. Join us next week. We have a great Wrestling Friends show. One of the people I wanted to have on very early on is a professional wrestler. You might know him, you might not know him, but you might know his name, and you might not know his story. His name is Colby Corino. Colby Corino is one of the more creative, interesting wrestlers in independent wrestling today. He has already had a long journey, and he's going to talk to us about addiction, mental health, and most importantly, perseverance. Of course, he is the son of Steve Corino, hardcore legend, someone who works in WWE, and Colby has had quite the journey, and he is someone who is a wrestling friend. And I'm really looking forward to having him on the show. He is really looking forward to telling his story. You know, he was just someone I said, you know, talked to him. I said, I really want you on the show. And he's like, I really want to tell the real stuff. I really want to tell the deal. So it's going to be very different from this week. And what a week it's been. We hope you enjoyed Wrestling Friends with Matt Koon. I still wasn't sure what the show was when I started. I just know I'm going to talk to a friend every week. I hope you enjoyed it. Please join us every week. Of course, we're on YouTube, probably. We're definitely on this feed, wrestlingfriend.com. Go to that. I think it's where the podcast is. I'm not sure. We're just getting started. But visit me at Matt Koon Music and give me some feedback. Tell me how much you loved it. If you didn't love it, you know, send it a DM. But if you loved it, go ahead and broadcast to the world, because there's 500 wrestling podcasts, but you only have one wrestling friend. We'll see you next week on Wrestling Friends with Matt Koon. Damn, it's weird saying my name, isn't it? All right. See you guys later. Bye.